All right, thank you so much for staying with Daybreak. You're just in time for this discussion that we're having. We're calling it the tax burden. We'd like you to jump in as well and tell us what your situation is like and what you think are the remedies going forward at Trevor Mbiji at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. It's all about tax burden here. I see there's a lot in the headlines, but before that, let me introduce my guest to you real quick. Reginald Kadzutu, economist with Amana Capital, is joining us on Skype from Mombasa. CPA Edwin Makori, who is the CEO, ISPAC, is about to join us. He's running a bit late. As soon as he comes in, we'll let him through. Philip Mwema is here, managing partner at Anderson Tax. Thank you so much for making time. And Bide Mwema, economist and CEO, Infallible Group. Thank you so much for making time as well. I see on the front page here of the Daily Nation that Yatani's plan for 120 billion extra budget. That's what they're saying. Supplementary budget has no provision for referendum, neither has Treasury set aside cash for members of the County Assembly's vehicle deal. But the bottom line is the state has overshot its approved budget, the 2020-2021 budget, by 120 billion shillings, mainly pressed by COVID-19 related expenditure. New documents filed in Parliament have now shown. So here's the simple thing. If you saw your pay slip the last month, I'm sure it slapped different, right? So let's find out why. We must start with you. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Trevor.
Why are we worse off now?
And I think if you look at pre-COVID, we had good measures to cushion the Mwananchi. I think at that point in time when COVID hit, we expanded the POA bands and reduced the top rate from 30% to 25%. And that meant then you had more disposable income to your pocket. Again, the presumption here is that you're employed. At the same time, VAT was reduced from 16% to 14%. Again, meaning goods were cheaper. By effect with that 2%, well, the debate is out there, the jury is out there, whether the manufacturers passed on that 2% to consumers. But effectively, that was meant to be the idea. Then come December, the Tax Amendments Act, we reinstate all these measures and we go back to pre-COVID days. So we've assumed COVID is gone. Bump up PAYE back to 30%, bump up VAT to 16%. In a place where, if you look at in 2020 during COVID, and just to put things in context, in 2019, the economy grew by about 5.4%. 2020, again, because of COVID, the economy grew by about 0.6%. So for an economy that's not grown, you've bumped up and put back all these measures in place in terms of taxes and restating. Obviously, and we have a runaway inflation, the Mwananchi feels a pinch. And then to make it, to aggravate the position, remember, we Kenyans, we love borrowing. Okay, we've got all these, I call them Sherlocks. They're called online lenders, or whatever you want to call them. You're in a place where government has gone to borrow locally. Borrowing locally means then me and you have to fight with government to borrow local, to borrow with the banks. But banks are comfortable giving government the funds because government is risk-free.
But not individuals.
But not individuals. So you have a place where government has gone in to borrow locally. Then the Sherlocks then get into place to try and lend at a super premium to you and I. In a place where there's a shrunk economy and things have dipped, obviously, I think if you talk to Wanjiku, Mweni, or Atieno, they're suffering as a result of that.
All right. Bide, what is your view on this? Are we actually worse off now?
First and foremost, good morning and thank you for having me on the show. In terms of whether we are worse off today, if you look at the government numbers that are coming through, when they were planning for these numbers, COVID had not happened. Because of what has happened with COVID-19, which is not only a localized impact, it's also a global impact, certainly there has been an impact. When you are looking at the national numbers, you're looking at what was the revenue estimates, what was the expectation. Revenue is coming from tax. The draft budget policy statement that we are now looking at has slightly revised downwards the tax element. The government hopes to be able to raise about 1.8 trillion shillings in Kenya.
Yeah.
On the flip side, expenditure has increased slightly, or rather there's been a slight adjustment to expenditure. It's now 2.88 trillion shillings. So we're in a space where revenue was not coming in for the first 6 months because of the closure of businesses. We'll be lucky if the government earns the 1.8 trillion, but expenditure is still there. People are still expending, whether at a national level or at a micro level.
Yeah.
So in essence, we are worse off for that particular 6 months, but because of the opening up of the economy, then the hope is that we are getting into a cycle of recovery. Businesses will be able to transact and generate money, but if you are an individual in Kenya, there's the added impact of you'll have to pay higher taxes, as Mr. Mwema has alluded to, in as far as VAT is concerned, in as far as higher tax rates are concerned. Your consumption will be more expensive, taxes will be higher, so it will be tighter for you in terms of the extent of your disposable income and what it can do for you at a personal level.
All right. Reginald, what are your thoughts on this?
So if we actually look at the number, pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID, now 2021, in terms of PAYE, you are actually better off, slightly marginally, by a small percentage than you were before pre-COVID. So I'll give you an example. If someone was earning 50,000, let's say they're not paying any pension, just your normal NSSF, you will have paid a PAYE of 7,596, considering a relief of 1,408. If you then go to COVID period, your PAYE was around 4,326. So there was actually an impetus to your income of around 1,000 and something, 3,200 and something. Come January, when they have now reinstated, but what you need to understand, pre-COVID, with a ban for 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30. During COVID, you had 10%, 15, 20, 25. Now, post-COVID, okay, not post-COVID, 2021, you only have a 10% band, 25% band, and a 30% band. But if you look at your PAYE, considering that they've left personal relief at the same level as during the COVID time, your PAYE for someone who earns 50,000 will be 7,323, lower than the 7,520 and 96 you will have paid. So the difference is minimal. For someone earning 50,000, the government has given you an extra 200 or something shillings on your paycheck.
Yeah.
But the true impact is now felt when VAT goes back to 16%. So still using that example of 50,000. So we remove your income tax, give you your personal relief, you pay a PAYE of 7,323, pay after tax is around 42,000, you remove NHIF, you remain with 41,276. If you then spend this whole 41,000, let's say in a supermarket, then there's an additional 16% taxation that you're going to be charged. So a person's debt burden is not only just their PAYE, but also the consumption tax that comes from VAT. And the truth of the matter is, yes, we are overburdened. We are overtaxed. If you start putting these other taxes, you go fuel your car, there's the 8% that you are charged. If you go buy bread, or whatever you're going to buy, which is not non-vatable, there's a 16% you're paying. But on a pure PAYE basis, the government has still left you an extra 200 shillings vis-a-vis pre-COVID.
All right. Are we overtaxed, Mwema?
Overtaxed.
Yeah.
I think as a preamble, let me just say, tax is the price you've got to pay for being in a civilized society.
Yeah.
So, and the question whether we overtaxed as individuals from where I sit, I think we're just at the right level.
Yeah.
In terms, because if you look at the bands and comparing the developed countries, the developing countries,
Yeah.
on employment taxes, I don't think, in my humble view, we're overtaxed. However, if you flip at it and look at entities, corporates, and that's why we've got challenges. We've just introduced the minimum tax.
Yeah.
And the minimum tax,
Which we will go to in just a bit and talk about it more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're looking at tax over and above, so context. We've got turnover tax,
Yeah.
which has been there, corporate tax, which has been there, and you pay on installment taxes. You've got digital services tax, which We'll talk about that briefly and them getting into there. Then introduce a minimum tax. And this minimum tax, your target, it's like making losses is criminal.
Yeah.
You have been taxed for making losses. But over and above that, this minimum tax is based on your turnover. And the exceptions are very minimum. I think it's only the petroleum, in the petroleum industry and insurance that are removed from minimum tax. So you've passed on another burden for minimum tax onto corporate to try and to meet our budget deficit. But and you're looking at it, and so you've got the very annoying tax or the VAT at 16%, as again it's turnover based. You've now introduced minimum tax targeting entities, and if you compare minimum tax vis-a-vis installment taxes, you pay whichever is higher. At that point in time, you're now overtaxing the corporate, and they're the ones that are meant to drive revenue, to grow the economy. When you bring in this burden of taxes, people start looking at other options.
Okay. Other options like maybe not paying them.
No, I mean, we're seeing a sad situation. So if you look at the horticultural sector, we're seeing an exodus of these entities into Ethiopia. Because Ethiopia has opened its borders and very friendly.
And the regime is friendly.
Into the regime. So if you look at the flower sector on its own, and we're talking, you introduce minimum taxes during COVID times, it employs a huge number of Kenyans in the flower sector. When that moves to Ethiopia, that is money that has left the country, and the impact in terms of the knock-on effect on the livelihoods in Naivasha. I think how we knew Naivasha 2 years ago and how we'll see Naivasha 5 years ago, we will be here to discuss.
And that's an interesting aspect, because then if the knockover effect is that the taxes are even collected now even less then, because then if people are moving to another regime that is friendlier, we are losing out on tax on this other side. Bide, you had mentioned the issue of spending. Is that where our problem really is? We spend more than we can bring in, basically living beyond our means.
We certainly have been living beyond our means for a very long time. I think at this point, COVID exacerbated the situation, because it's what the government had intended to collect, but it can't collect this largely because of what is happening to the institutions. Based on the draft budget policy statement, we are looking at an expenditure level of 2.88 trillion. The same statement says that the government of Kenya expects to collect about 1.8 trillion. So there's 1 trillion that needs to be accounted for. And I know the discourse is on taxation, and there's going to be an increased burden on the individuals in Kenya today. And I like what Mr. Mwema is saying, then you'll have an essence of businesses going to other countries, which actually negates the purpose and the spirit behind the Big Four agenda, which is focusing on manufacturing. Higher taxes make it more expensive to operate. But when you come to the expenditure side, there's a whole element of the wage bill, which is a continuing conversation that doesn't seem to abate. There's a lot of leakages in terms of where is this money being spent? Is it being allocated to productive use? Is there a proper accountability of where these funds are going? Because it's one thing to say, Bithe, we shall increase your tax burden for the year. But unfortunately, for the way we have the systems and structures, Bithe cannot go and start asking, but what happened to the taxes that I paid? I can only see what is happening. So there needs to be an element of accountability that's either enshrined in the current constitution or the institution of BBI that we're trying to change. But people need to be able to ask and demand to get answers for where's this money going, where's the productivity coming, and do we need to get more from the government and the services that we are paying for?
All right, I have to take a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, we're still talking about this issue of tax burden, and all my guests are with me now. The CEO for ISPAC, that is CPA Edwin Makori, has just walked in. We'll be speaking to him in just a bit, all right? See you shortly.